will come to order. We're going to be taking up Senate File 925, Senator Dibble's bill this afternoon. It's the only item on our agenda, and so everyone understands how we're going to approach this. I'm going to just let you know what to expect here. We're going to give 40 minutes for each side, starting with the proponents, after Senator Dibble presents the bill. After we've done the proponents and the opponents, we're going to open up 16 minutes divided for additional testimony from the audience. And then we'll have about 1 hour for discussion at the table, and we will proceed to vote today before the committee adjourns at 2:30. So, members, in terms of logistics here, if you would hold your questions during the testimony from the proponents and opponents, and when we have a chance to open up the floor for discussion amongst ourselves, then we can have the questions and can ask testifiers to come back and answer them if we wish to do that. Now, there are a number of other committees going on, so for people who are not familiar with the process here, members sometimes may need to leave the committee here to attend to business at other committees going on in the Capitol. But we have been specifically asked by members that they be notified when we get to the point of taking any votes. And so, if necessary, we will pause before we take any votes so members can reassemble from any other committees that they might be at. So I think that's it in terms of our preliminary announcements. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Oh, no, one other thing. We are, just as a matter of protocol, we will not be allowing any demonstrations from members of the audience, no vocalizations, cheers, boos, anything like that. So we will respect the decorum of the proceeding, and anyone who violates that will be asked to leave the room. All right.
That include rolling eyes, Mr. Chair?
Rolling eyes I will not do anything about. But if I can hear it, it's a problem.
All right.
All right, Senator Dibble, Senate File 925.
Great, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, we do have an A1 amendment, a couple of technical changes, one substantive change.
Okay, and Senator Dibble, this is your first committee. For the audience that's not familiar with the process, we have what is called an author's amendment. It puts the bill in the shape that the author wishes for it to be considered, and this would be that amendment. So Senator Goodwin offers the A1 amendment. We do have a quorum, by the way, present for the record. All in favor of the A1 amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Mr. Chair and members, I have before you Senate File 925, which would allow loving, committed, same-sex couples the same access to the civil laws of our state, as is their fundamental right, guaranteed as equal citizens of Minnesota, but more importantly, as human beings, with the same hopes, fears, dreams, aspirations, dignity, exact same as every single one of you. And File 925 gives them the ability to get married. And why marriage? Why is it so important? I'm guessing that if each of you looks into your own hearts, you'll find the answer. People fall in love. They decide that they want to share their lives and build something together. A family, a home, careers, a legacy. Let's be honest. Life can be hard from time to time. But sharing the burden alongside that special, amazing someone, your husband or your wife, when the love of family and friends and community surrounds you, those challenges of life are easier to bear, easier to overcome. Raising children takes a lot of time, energy, and money, and a lot of love. Children flourish in families regardless of their composition, that are stable, strong, and loving. Marriage is the unique and special opportunity to ask for the support of our family and our community, help keep us strong and hold us accountable to our publicly declared bond and commitment. It creates a larger connection to each other's relationships in a way that just doesn't exist otherwise. Likewise, it allows a couple to be of support to their larger circle of family and friends. love, commitment, and responsibility. Family. This bill seeks to uphold and affirm exactly what we treasure and value the most in our lives, protecting the people we love, because marriage means family in a way that nothing else does. In Minnesota, it should not be illegal to marry the person you love. The bill before us simply asks us to treat everyone with dignity and respect, as we would want to be treated ourselves. It's actually not that complicated because nothing changes and nothing is redefined. Mr. Chair and members, marriage is actually strengthened when we make it available to all people and encourage commitment, responsibility, and caring for each other. Nothing bad happens, only good things happen. Families are stronger and more resilient, children are taken care of, people are allowed to take positive action on their own behalf. Our larger community is made stronger, and freedom itself is expanded. And freedom isn't just for some of us. It is for all of us. Members, Minnesotans engaged in this debate last year. And last November defeated a proposed amendment to our state's constitution that would have walled off marriage permanently and limited the access to freedoms guaranteed in that very document to some of their fellow citizens. So, Mr. Chair, members, that's the proposition that's before you. I appreciate your time and attention and your consideration of the discussion today. Mr. Chair, I can run through the bill quickly at this point if you'd like.
Yes, please, Senator Dibble.
So turning your attention to the language of the bill itself, starting with Section 1. Section 1 provides an amendment to the State's Human Rights Act, Chapter 363A. Some would characterize it as an expansion. I would characterize it as a clarification. Mr. Chair, members, it's important to know that the State's Human Rights Act already provides fairly substantive and substantial accommodations and exemptions for the free exercise of religion in support of the clear and strong language of our U.S. Constitution and our state's Constitution. But what this would add to, in addition to the already spelled out exemptions, that those religious institutions, corporations, educational institutions, etc., that object on religious grounds are not obligated to provide goods, services, facilities, or accommodations to marriage ceremonies and celebrations. It's what we call the Knights of Columbus Hall language. Section 2 is where we start language of the marriage statutes themselves. And it simply provides clarification that marriage is available to two persons with all of the restrictions and conditions that are already contained within the marriage laws. Confirming that marriage is a civil contract, this is a civil matter. That's existing language. And just eliminating some of the restrictions and prohibitions around same-sex couples. That you find that in Section 2 and Section 3, as well as Section 4. Yes. Section 5 is language that's included that, again, simply essentially restates language that we already find in our Constitution, in our Human Rights Act, and elsewhere. But it's put in there simply to make it crystal clear, communicate so there can be no question or doubt that no religious organization, no religious faith, tradition, no member of the clergy or other similarly situated persons are required to solemnize a marriage, perform a marriage ceremony, recognize a marriage, etc., and they're not subject to any fine, penalty, civil liability for failing to do so for any reason. Folks may read this as the ability to refuse marriage to same-sex couples, but that would, of course, apply in the instance of a Lutheran couple who might ask to be married in a Catholic church. The Catholic Church can clearly decline to do so. Section 6 we removed one of the provisions in Section 6, and that would be subdivision 2. We don't need to deal with that. But subdivision 1 simply states that this bill has no effect on previous anti-discrimination laws. Does not increase the legal liability of any person, business, labor organization. We adjusted that language to conform to the language of the Human Rights Act rather than saying labor union. The language in the Human Rights Act is labor organization or religious institution. So basically that language simply says that this bill neither expands nor contracts existing human rights provisions of the Human Rights Act. And then the subdivision 3, which would become subdivision 2, the goal of subdivision 3 or 2 is to simply provide that those rights and responsibilities of spouses or parents, including those that establish parentage presumptions based on marriage, are not changed in any way by virtue of this bill or this law. And then finally, Section 7 allows for those couples who have gotten married in Minnesota but perhaps have moved to another state where they could not get married and come back to Minnesota for the purpose of getting divorced without first having to establish a 6-month residency. Presently, if you're seeking to get divorced in Minnesota, you have to have lived here for 6 months. That potentially puts some individuals in fairly untenable circumstances if they had gotten married here, move away for whatever reason, they need to seek a divorce. It's not available to them in their state because their state doesn't recognize same-sex marriage in any way, shape, or form. Hence, they don't have access to the divorce laws of their state. They can simply come back to Minnesota, seek their divorce, and then all of the existing laws and statutes around divorce continue to hold true. Mr. Chair, that is the bill. Stand for questions, or we can move to testimony.
Why don't we see if there are any just technical questions about the language in the bill itself, members, at this time. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and move on then to the testimony?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to vacate the table and just have you invite folks up. I'm going to sit over there.
Very good.
If that's agreeable.
That's just fine, Senator Dibble. Okay, we will now move to the a portion of the hearing where we will hear from the proponents. There will be 40 minutes set aside for this portion of the hearing, and our first testifier will be Richard Painter. I will try to remember to remind testifiers of this, but either before or after you're done testifying, please go ahead and sign the sign-in sheet while you were there. And just so you know who's coming up next, so you can be prepared, Marilyn Carlson Nelson will be, I'm sorry, Dr. Paul Melkert will be next, and then Marilyn Carlson Nelson.
Scott just finished.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much to you and to the members of the committee for inviting me here to testify today. My name is Richard Painter. My wife and I and our 3 children moved here to Minnesota 6 years ago so the 2 of us could teach at the University of Minnesota and enjoy living here. After I served for 2.5 years as the chief ethics lawyer and associate counsel for the president in the White House for President George W. Bush. I'm thrilled to live here in Minnesota, and I was thrilled just this last week to help found a new organization, Republicans United for Freedom, which is committed to the fundamental principles of the Republican Party that have been articulated since the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, running through the last Republican vice president. And in the words of Richard Cheney, freedom means freedom for everyone. Republicans understand that some things are none of the government's business, and one of them is who you marry, who you love, and how you raise your family. And it's for this reason that I joined 130 other Republicans, including my former White House colleague, Margaret Hoover, and many others whom I worked with in the Bush administration signing a brief that was filed with the United States Supreme Court a few weeks ago urging the Supreme Court to confirm the freedom to marry for every American. And it's for this reason that I agree strongly with the many businesses, major corporations, including Apple Computer and Morgan Stanley and others, that submitted another brief to the United States Supreme Court urging the court to once again confirm that every American has the freedom to marry, and urging that California's Proposition 8 be overturned. Many Republicans in this state and around the country are coming around to the view that individual liberty as a fundamental principle of our party is more important than getting mired in social issues such as marriage and the definition of marriage, which do not belong with government. They belong with our religious institutions and in our families and in our homes. Our government should allow individuals the freedom to love whom they choose and marry whom they choose. And for this reason, the Republicans United for Freedom group that I am starting just this last week, and many, many others around the country, will urge this body and legislatures throughout the United States to confirm the right to marry. I want to emphasize I'm a devout Christian. I was active in the White House Christian Fellowship when I was there in the Bush administration, and I feel very strongly that religious freedom means religious freedom for all, including myself, because I'm a member of a church that celebrates same-sex marriage, and I'm proud of it. And I'm also proud to be an American, I'm proud to be a Republican, and I'm proud to be a Minnesotan. And thank you very much for the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you, Mr. Pater. We welcome to the table Dr. Paul Melkert, and so that we use our time most efficiently, we'll ask Marilyn Carlson Nelson to also come forward and sit at the table to be ready to testify when Dr. Melkert is concluded. And then after that will be Pastor Eric Strand. Dr. Melkert, I hope I pronounced that right, sir.
That is correct. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak to you today on behalf of Senate File 925. My name is Paul Melkert. I'm a pediatrician, a father, and a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics, a national organization of more than 62,000 pediatricians committed to the attainment and optimal physical, mental, and social health and well-being of all children and young adults. The American Academy of Pediatrics supports marriage equality for all capable and consenting couples, including those who are the same gender, as a means of guaranteeing all federal and state rights and benefits to ensure the long-term security of their children. Freedom means freedom for everyone, equality means equality for everyone, and security should be secured for all children. Civil marriage should be a social institution that promotes healthy families, regardless of whether they're headed by same or opposite-gendered partners. It confers a powerful set of rights, benefits, and privileges that cannot be obtained by any other means. Denying marriage equality greatly threatens children's access to health insurance and to health care services. Recently, the board of the Minnesota chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics unanimously voted to uphold the right of all children and families to the legal, financial, and psychosocial security that comes from having their parents legally recognized, those who are committed to each other and for the welfare of their children. Security comes through love and commitment, not through sexual orientation. All families benefit from the reassurance that comes from knowing that your family is safe, secure, and afforded equal protection under the law. There is broad consensus through all the major medical organizations, based on hundreds of papers and more than 30 years of research, that there is no relationship between parents' sexual orientation and any measure of a child's emotional, psychosocial, or behavioral adjustment. Rather, children's optimal development seems to be influenced more by the nature of the relationships and the interactions within the family rather than the particular structural form that it takes. This affects the more than 5,500 children that are currently being raised by same-gender parents in the state of Minnesota. No doubt opponents of equality will bring up the Regnerus family structure paper that was published last year. This is the only paper the opposition will cite. It is the only paper published that is not in line with current professional consensus. When published, his flawed methodology was widely criticized, and the author himself has publicly acknowledged that his assumptions resulted in not examining children by two same-sex parents, and accordingly cannot speak to the impact of same-sex parenting on child outcomes. I have a need to know about his paper. I'd like to be handed out, please.
We'll have a committee staff come hand that out to the members.
The only conclusion that can be reached from his papers is that the family stability is predictive of child well-being. Children raised by same-sex parents would benefit from the enhanced stability the institution of marriage would provide to their parents and their families. I urge you to pass legislation that supports marriage equality and other legal protections for same-gender couples and their children. The rights, benefits, and protections for all people can further strengthen every family. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Dr. Melkert. Ms. Carlson-Nelson and then Pastor Eric Strand, if you come forward and be prepared to testify.
Mr. Chairman and
Welcome.
Senator Dibble, thank you very much, and distinguished members of the committee. I, too, appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. I am Marilyn Carlson-Nelson. I'm chair of Carlson Companies, a multi-generational, multinational corporation here in our community. But I also speak to you as a mom, a grandma, a Christian who's grown up in this community. Last year, I spoke out against the amendment that threatened to enshrine discrimination against gay marriage in our state Constitution. In their wisdom, the voters of Minnesota rejected that amendment, making our state the first in the nation to strike a blow against this kind of discrimination. It was entirely consistent with our values, with the values that I grew up with here in Minnesota: tolerance, caring, and inclusivity. But now I think it's time to finish what we started. As a business owner, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about what I see in the business setting.
Ms. Carlson-Nelson, could you pull the mic a little bit closer to you, please? Thank you.
As a business owner, that better?
Yes, thank you.
As a business owner, I want to stress that Minnesota cannot afford to disadvantage our workplace, particularly among the next generation of workers, those under 45. Research tells us that this group of young people favor the freedom to marry 2 to 1. At a time when the state demographer warns that our annual labor force growth will drop to nearly 0 in the next dozen years as baby boomers retire, we must aggressively recruit and retain these young workers. They are essential to infusing our state with energy, creativity, and innovation. And they are not attracted to discriminatory environments in which to live and work. That's one reason why so many of our Minnesota companies have been speaking out on gay equality for some time now. Hundreds of businesses across our state, including a majority of the state's Fortune 500 companies, grant partner health benefits. But I am here to assure you today that these policies are not a substitute for equal rights under the law. We continue to have second-class citizens who are not afforded these rights. Nearly 20% of our country has now extended marriage rights to same-sex couples. These states are our competition in all the talent wars, and the talent wars that will continue to heat up over the next generation. We can expect the field to expand rapidly, with the majority of Americans now favoring marriage equality. So I'm here today to tell you that business needs you to make marriage equality the law in Minnesota. But I'm also here to talk about some unfinished business. We must ask ourselves, are we living up to our Minnesota values of inclusivity, human dignity, and human rights? As I visited with several of my Carlson colleagues youth shelters in Minnesota, These are the places that our runaway youth are often taken by law enforcement, and the first call they make is to their parents to tell them the good news that their child who has run away is safe. How shocked and discouraged was I to hear that 46% of the beds are occupied by GLBT youth who have been kicked out of their home, and when they call those parents, the parents are not eager to have them back. I received letters from Carlson employees, letters from employees of other companies across our state, and from people that I had never met, telling me stories of broken families, of alienation, and of suicide. Grateful that I had given voice to their pain and yearnings for the same freedoms that other Americans enjoy. And I reflect so often on the words of Hubert Humphrey. Freedom, he said, does not fall freely like rain. It must be earned by each generation. Today, it's our turn to earn our freedom by not withholding it from others. To deny our gay citizens and their children full rights under the law is no more, to my mind, than adult bullying, and we must put an end to it. When this day is done, I hope that others will look at us and say, Minnesota got it right from start to finish. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee.
Thank you, Ms. Carlson-Nelson. Our next testifier will be Pastor Eric Strand, and after that, Reverend Bill Chadwick, if you'd come forward and sit at the table as well. Pastor Strand.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to testify in favor of this bill this afternoon. My name is Pastor Eric Strand, and I live in Edina, Minnesota, and I've been a pastor at Edina Community Lutheran Church for almost 24 years. I come here today as a pastor and as a citizen, and also as a husband and father and grandfather. I come here to encourage you to vote yes to ensure that same-gendered couples have the same opportunity to marry as Minnesota straight couples. I've been a pastor for almost 34 years and been privileged to participate in hundreds of marriages and weddings, celebrations where two people come together to make public promises to one another, promises to be for and with each other for their whole life long, whether it be joys or sorrows. We in the church believe that these promises of lifelong until death do us part forms of fidelity reflect God's promises to creation and to humanity. We also believe that these public events, which allow family and friends and community to make promises of support and accountability to the couple, are the reason we celebrate these marriages as a sign of the strengthening of human community. But I've also witnessed same-gender couples not receive that support from the rule of law in our state. And I, as a person who regularly prays and reads Scripture, I am led to advocate for policies and laws which will enhance and provide protections for all couples who choose to make such a wonderfully bold commitment as marriage is. This, I believe, will build up the common good for all of us in this state. And so as a person of faith, I advocate for the full support of law to deepen and strengthen the promises that all couples make in our religious ceremonies and rites, including same-gender couples. Mr. Chair and members of this committee, thank you for allowing me to testify in support of this bill.
Thank you, Pastor Strand. Reverend Bill Chadwick will be next. After that, Pastor David Kopp, who's come forward to take a seat. Reverend Chadwick.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Bill Chadwick, one of the pastors of Oak Grove Presbyterian Church in Bloomington. I'm one of the millions of people of faith that over the years have changed our minds on this issue. I want to share personally, by the time my nephew Jim was 3 or 4 years old, I was quite sure that he was gay. It has been the deep and wonderful privilege as a pastor for me to officiate at the weddings of 4 of my nieces. But current state law infringes upon my freedom of religion to officiate at the wedding of my nephew Jim. One comic has said, "Let gays marry. Why shouldn't they be as miserable as the rest of us?" But I'm not miserable, not most of the time, and when it is, it's my own fault. My marriage means the world to me, and a civil union just wouldn't cut it. My wife and I will celebrate 25 years of marriage next month. My marriage is a place of safety, commitment, companionship, intimacy, and trust. And yes, I suppose all those things can happen without marriage. But the relationship my wife and I have is celebrated and affirmed and encouraged by the world. And why shouldn't my nephew Jim have that same sort of celebration and affirmation and encouragement simply because of the way he was born? Marriage says we are family in a way no other word does. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Chadwick. Pastor Cobb is next, and then David Patten. If you come forward, you'll be after Pastor Cobb. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, it is indeed a deep privilege to be able to address you in support of this legislation. I serve as pastor of Spirit of Joy Christian Church in Lakeville, Minnesota. For 23 years, it has been my deep privilege in ministry to officiate at weddings for loving couples in every church I have served. It is a humble joy to stand with a loving couple as they commit themselves to one another. I look forward to the day our 14-year-old son meets someone he chooses to marry, just not yet. 5 years ago in Lynchburg, Virginia, where I was serving at the time, 2 young women came to me. They had met in our church and they were asking to marry. I considered their request the same as I would any other couple in the church. Of course, the church would bless their covenant of love and mutual commitment. In our months of premarital counseling, I saw firsthand just how much pain we inflict on a minority of loving families when we deny them the privileges we gladly grant to others. I realized just how many privileges my wife Katie and I enjoy simply because we are married. For 23 years, we have shared the good, hard work of life together, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health. We've been blessed with opportunities, privileges, and responsibilities because we have the freedom to marry. And no pastor, church, or religious institution can ever be forced to solemnize a union they do not support. I have said no to couples before, and I know many pastors who have. But many congregations like mine yearn for the day we can say yes to all loving, committed couples equally, not only as a church, but as a wider society. I urge you to support this legislation that affirms what we already know. Not only that marriage is good, hard work, but also and especially that it is rooted in love, commitment, and responsibility, and it is a benefit to society. It is time to end the discrimination and honor loving, committed same-sex couples with the same freedoms and opportunities as the rest of us. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Pastor Cobb. David Patten, come forward, and after that will be Chip Martin and Bill Chafee.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm David Patten, and I speak in support. I was here 2 years ago, and I'm back to remind you what I said then. For those of you that are worried about the children raised by gay parents, I'm here to tell you we're doing fine. We're okay. George and my dad have been together for over 30 years. They both had a hand in raising me. They taught me to watch out for others and to be kind. And you would be amazed what gay dads can teach you about how to impress women. They taught me that the most important thing is creating memories with the people you love. We'd go to the theater or play games. We'd go on vacations. We'd eat frog legs and snails and sharks and all that grody stuff that little boys love. They invested their time and their love in us kids and gave us everything a parent should. And that's what I want from my son. A whole belly full of happy memories with his family. But as a kid, I never knew that George was my family. Back then, nobody ever told me that. See, in society's eyes, when two people marry, a new family is created. My dad and George were never married, so our family didn't count. Today, my son calls George granddad because we are family. And I worry about the children in Minnesota who are out there today wondering if their family is a real family. And I worry about my son, Anderson. My heart aches to think that he's going to grow up, he's going to fall in love, and then somebody's going to tell him that his love and his family don't count. Pass this bill. Please, protect our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patten. Chip Martin and Bill Chafee, and after that will be Kate Wolfe and Mary Ann Christensen. Identify yourself for the record also. Be sure to sign it.
Will do. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Dr. Chip Martin, and this is my partner, Bill Chafee. We live in St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I want to thank all of you for allowing us to come here to the Capitol today to speak on behalf of this bill. Bill and I have been in a loving and committed relationship for the last 8 years. 4 years ago, we adopted our daughter, Olivia, and 2 years later, Landon came along.
The adoption process was initially fearful. We were unsure of the reaction to expect from our friends, family, and community members. Fortunately, as we began to let people know of our intention to adopt, support gathered behind us. We're continually amazed with the ease of how well we fit into virtually every aspect of our child's life. Our preschool, our neighborhood, even our church.
We feel the incredible support from so many friends and family and community members. There are many different types of normal families with parents who may be biological, adoptive, step, foster, grandparents, and other configurations that make up the adults in many thriving families. We are a family just like any other family, and no family is less deserving or less worthy than another.
We're simply two adoptive parents in a suburban neighborhood surrounded by liberals and conservatives who support us and our family. We're here today because our children deserve to have the same stability that marriage brings to all other families with legally married parents in their communities.
I would very much one day like to answer Olivia's question differently when she asked me, Daddy Chip, are you and Daddy Bill married?
No, Olivia. Some people don't want us to get married. They don't understand that we're a family. They don't think that Daddy Chip and I love each other.
I cannot wait for the day that I can respond with something more like this.
We're planning on getting married real soon, just like Uncle Brandon and Auntie Erica did.
In Olivia's eyes, we are just like all the other families she knows, and she just can't quite understand why we don't have the same rights as everyone else around her and in her life.
Olivia's mom sees her about once a month. Landon's mom wants nothing to do with him. We're happy to be their parents. We look forward to the day when we can walk down the aisle together and profess our love and commitment in front of God, our family, and our friends, with Olivia and Landon as our flower girl and ring bearer.
Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, thank you very much for allowing us to speak to you today.
Thank you, Dr. Martin and Mr. Chafee. Kate Wolfe and Mary Ann Christensen, on forward. Welcome to the committee. Please just make sure you identify your name and sign in when you get a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kate Wolfe, and I'm here to speak in support of Senate File 925. To my right is my wife and partner of 32 years, Mary Ann Christensen. When I met Mary Ann in 1980, I knew that she was the one. There was no doubt in my mind that she was the person I was meant to spend the rest of my life with. We shared the same traditional ideas that marriage was about love, caring, and commitment to one person for life. Without the legal ability to marry, we exchanged rings and committed privately to each other. In 2000, Vermont became the first state to permit civil unions between same-sex couples. We were joined in civil union on our 20th anniversary. Our love and commitment to each other was finally recognized somewhere, but it wasn't our home, and civil union status implied that we weren't good enough to be married. In 2005, Canada recognized the freedom of same-sex couples to marry. We traveled to Toronto and were married by a minister from the United Church of Canada. Our vows were from the 16th century Book of Common Worship, the Book of Common Prayer. After 25 years of waiting, we were legally married. It was the best day of my life. Then we returned to Minnesota. We were hit with the reality that our marriage was no longer recognized when we were processed separately at customs. Now, when we are asked our marital status on official forms, we don't know what to say. Some places consider us married. Other places consider us strangers. When we travel, we carry copies of our marriage certificate, our living wills, and our power of attorney forms. As we grow older, we worry about what will happen if one of us is hospitalized. Will we be able to see each other or make important medical decisions? Marriage is important. It provides stability in our communities. It sets an example of long-term, faithful commitment. It allows a couple to care for and protect each other and their families. And it helps couples honor their commitment until death. Recognizing our marriage and allowing other couples like us to marry doesn't redefine marriage. It honors the tradition of marriage. I ask you to please support Senate File 925. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfe. Ms. Christensen, did you wish to add anything?
I'm just back up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next, we will have Phil and Randy Raitan, and after that, Tom Horner. Please correct me if I misspelled your name, or mispronounced your name, rather.
Well, I'm a Norwegian, so it's Rondi.
Ah, that's not the one I thought I might have mispronounced.
I'm also Norwegian, and nobody can say it right, but it's Raitan.
Raitan. All right. Welcome to the committee. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I appreciate so much being able to talk to each one of you today. You hold in your hands very special responsibility. As you know, I'm Rondi Raitan, and this is my husband, Philip. And this is my dear son, Jake. He's our youngest. We love Jake so very much. We come today as a family with dreams that one day soon Minnesota will grant Jake the freedom to marry. We want for Jacob what has been so precious to us the last 40 years. We want Jacob to have the joy of a wedding. We want him to have the firm foundation a marriage brings to a family. And we want this societal support that comes with marriage.
Jacob came out 15 years ago, and Rondi and I didn't know anything about being gay. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't have any gay friends. We simply didn't understand. We certainly didn't realize the discrimination that followed. Jacob was patient with us, and he led us. We found precious friends in the gay community who have enriched our lives. Ever since, we've been on a journey as a family, working to see the day of equality. You know, Rondi and I have been married for 40 years. My parents have been married for 70 years. Each of my children, except Jake, gotten married. We long to rejoice on Jacob's wedding day. He'll be surrounded by each of his siblings. He'll be surrounded by his entire family and all of his friends. And his parents will be in the front pew.
As my dad was saying, over the past few years, I've stood by the side of each of my three siblings as they married the ones they love. The locations of their nuptials were scenic and special. My eldest brother, Ben, on the sands of a beach in San Diego. My other brother, Josh, in the quaint backyard of the St. Paul College Club. and my sister Britta on the beautiful Mississippi River at the Nicollet Island Pavilion. During each ceremony, I wiped away tears as my siblings exchanged vows and forged new families with their beloveds. And after each ceremony, I took pen to paper and signed marriage licenses for each couple. By doing so, I made official in the eyes of the government what was already official in the hearts of the newlyweds. As a gay man, I should have the same opportunity to marry as my three siblings. My desire to love is no less valid and no less worthy of recognition by our state than theirs. My ability to enjoy the rights and responsibilities of marriage is in your hands, and I hope that you'll treat me the way that you would treat my siblings, or your siblings, or your children, or yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. And please be sure that each of you sign the sheet there for testifiers. Tom Horner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. You know, over my nearly 40-year career, I've had the good fortune to work closely with some of the most influential and thoughtful Minnesota business, community, and civic leaders. And while they differ in many ways, they all agree on two essential keys to the success of Minnesota. First, Minnesota's greatest asset is our workforce. We have a population of well-educated, innovative, and productive people. And second, the growth in the working-age population will remain flat for years to come. Economic growth depends on attracting and retaining the best and brightest workers. Over the years, we've fared well in this competition for talent. Young, educated professionals from around the country have migrated to Minnesota because of the many assets we offer, including our major league sports, outdoor recreation, and arts communities. Talented professionals came and stayed in Minnesota for another reason, though. They found innovative employers who were among the nation's leaders in creating diverse, welcoming workplaces. In particular, gay and lesbian couples found a home in which they could prosper, raise families, and become part of a supportive community. Now, though, the bar has been raised. Respected business publications like The Economist report that companies are in serious competition to create welcoming environments. This isn't just to attract and retain gay and lesbian professionals. Compelling data are definitively concluding that communities with welcoming environments are most appealing to the majority of all young, well-educated professionals. Employers can only do so much. Public policy needs to catch up with public attitudes and public realities. Treating all Minnesotans equally by extending the freedom to marry to same-sex couples is the right thing to do. But it also is the smart thing to do as we build a state where all Minnesotans can prosper and all families can thrive. The legislation being considered today will help do just that, and I urge you to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. All right, that concludes our portion of the testimony from the proponents. We will now have testimony from the opponents of the proposed legislation. And we will start with Catherine Kirsten.